Just talking about there's sort of another narrative of, I guess, a FUD narrative potentially that's been building where
Hmm.
people are saying that BlackRock and Strategy and
Hmm.
other ETFs are really taking up a lot of the supply of Bitcoin, and that their intention potentially is for everyone to just only be able to trade their ETF or through them by custodying the coins.
Hmm.
Um, and what is your sort of response to that? And do you think actually that actually makes retail and custodial Bitcoin even more valuable?
Yeah, I think the main reason for ETFs and things like that is that you have a lot of trapped capital around all over the place. If you have money in a retirement account or something like that, you can't just go out and buy Bitcoin with it. There are certain rules around that money that supposedly belongs to you, but there are rules around it so that you get favorable tax treatment and so on. So it's for that reason stuff like ETFs exist. But there are treasury companies that are essentially leverage Bitcoin plays where they take out debt to go buy more Bitcoin and so on, which is essentially what Strategy is, MetaPlanet, all these other companies. Um, what we're finding though is that a lot of people like that exposure to Bitcoin, but really don't want the responsibility of self custody and so on. And I think that's really going to bite them in the end, because what you're going to see is kind of like what you saw with oil futures a few years ago, right? I think this was post, like after all the lockdowns and stuff, and there wasn't that much demand for oil. Oil futures actually went negative, and that's the underlying obviously still has value, but the future itself was in a negative position. It started decoupling because exposure to the asset is not the asset itself, and that was sort of like the thing that people believed, which proved to be false. And I think we're starting to see some of that. I don't know if you've seen some of these treasury companies, but something like NACA is at like 20 cents, right? Their pipe price was like $1.10 or something like that. It's currently absolutely insane that it is that low. And had you held Bitcoin from when that stock hit its pipe price, you would have done way better than they have, which is down 80% since for any pipe lockup or whatever. And that sort of like decoupling of exposure versus the underlying asset is common in stuff like this. And it doesn't happen all the time. Usually they move together, but when they break, you're usually going to get screwed over, right? The people that have custody of it, they're the ones that are protected, and it's in those sort of like extreme instances that you want that protection the most. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going to find out the hard way. I mean, maybe Bitcoin does go up to 800,000 or whatever, and they have it in one of these instruments, and there's like a flash crash or something like that, and they get liquidated, and they don't see any of the upside while being exposed to more downside. And that's how I see this playing out. In the short term, maybe you do make a little bit more money because they're leverage plays or whatever, but the risk I personally don't think is worth it.
When we talked about, I think we talked about this before as well, just around the distribution of mining
Mm-hmm.
and I guess the concentration of it over time has in some ways been seen to go a little bit closer towards certain data centers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and do you think what is your sort of view right now on that centralized or that no, it's not centralization to remove doubt, more
No.
that trend towards some of the major
Mm-hmm.
data centers?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
the
and I personally think that's like a fiat phenomenon, and we see this everywhere. There is, fiat money is that you scale up, and there's like a subtle reason for this, and it's because you have access to infinite loans, right? If you are a company and you want to acquire your competitor, you kind of can, because the bank will just sort of lend you money and you make that money back, more or less being a monopoly or something like that. Um, and the bank can do that because they print the loans out of nothing. But in a sound money economy, you actually have to save enough money, right, and be able to use that to go and acquire your competitor by and that would take a lot of time, and by then your competitor would probably be as big as you and have their own savings. It was very difficult to get as large as you do in a fiat economy, and that's, I think, what's happened with a lot of different markets, energy definitely being one of them, data centers and things like that. um, one of the things that a lot of miners point out to me is that the entire business of Bitcoin mining is actually like a very um, like it doesn't scale that well, because what happens with a lot of energy is that you can only get a certain amount at a decent price. So if you are next to a hydroelectric dam and you bring in a whole bunch of miners to mine from that dam, you're going to get a good price on like the first, I don't know, megawatt of energy or whatever. But beyond that, when the utility would rather sell to retail because they pay way more, or even like factories and things like that, because those are the places that really need it and they're willing to pay more for it. Uh, and they're giving you sort of like the leftover. If you double the capacity of that, you're not going to get the same price on it. The margins become smaller and smaller the more units you have. So it's not really that kind of a scalable business. And really, it's arbitraging where energy is produced but isn't being used, and it's going to be generally limited. It's going to be geographically constrained, and it lends itself to being a very smallish businesses all over the world. And I think that's kind of a natural decentralization that would happen without fiat money. But of course, fiat money makes it so that you can operate kind of at a loss and keep acquiring people. Companies, and making it look like you're doing something good when you're not, running profitably when you're not, and so on. So that's, I think, where a lot of these data centers are. And yeah, I was reading about how many data center build outs there are, just because of AI and so on. Vast majority of those are not going to get built, and a lot of them are misallocated funds, malinvestments, and we've yet to see sort of the reckoning from that, but it's definitely coming, because there's no way they can build out that much that quickly. There just aren't enough electricians and things like that.
Jimmy, just I guess, circling back, there obviously we published a bunch of content together in 2000 November 30, 2018, January 24, 2019, two very interesting times. We're in an interesting time, always have been, through Bitcoin. But the person who's watching right now, listening to
Mm.
this, that missed the boat because they didn't take an action back in 2018, what
Mm.
would be your message to them, um, and really your fundamental truth about Bitcoin that they need to know from here?
Yeah, whenever you're investing, and most people approach Bitcoin as an investment, at least at first. Um, if you're going to make money, you need to have some sort of edge, right? In almost anything, if you're putting money towards something, you have to believe that you know something that the rest of the market does not, and that's where you make money. Because if everyone else knew it, then it's probably priced closer to what it should be, rather than if they were missing something. And that requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of conviction, a lot of courage. And I would challenge those viewers or listeners that haven't gotten in to go and study this stuff, because you clearly didn't understand something 7 years ago. You clearly did not were not courageous enough to go and um, uh, get into it, or you didn't have the conviction. What, like, at least learn from your mistake from 7 years ago. And I think what you'll find is that the thesis from 7 years ago still holds true today. I think it's going to be a global reserve currency. And if it is going to be a global reserve currency, then it is massively underpriced. What is the sum of all M2 money, even around the world? It's a significant amount of money. And it's significantly more than the market cap of Bitcoin. So if you can understand where it's going, that's going to give you the conviction to go buy and hold. And there are other things that you have to work on internally, including acting on what you know, instead of just sort of sitting on the sidelines and saying, "See, I told you so," or something like that, without actually acting. And that part is courage, and a lot of people lack it. But go and figure out what it is that you did wrong, that 7 years ago, that you didn't get into this stuff, because clearly you were wrong. And what did you get wrong? What's your analysis? And a lot of people sort of have a sour grapes attitude, like, oh, I those people just got lucky, and whatever makes them look good for not investing 7 years ago, they're bound to believe. And a lot of people are like that. It's not intellectually honest. You have to figure out what actually happened and understand what all this stuff is. And that's the path to conviction and courage and opportunity, really. And that's what I would suggest that you get going on.
Jimmy Song, it's always a pleasure, and appreciate your perspective. And I think we're in an incredible time. Hopefully we don't have as big a time period between chatting. And again, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and ongoingly. And everyone who's watching the show deeply appreciates you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.